Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you're located. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar, HP Folio, the Ultrabook for the Mobile Professional. You've joined a great webinar today. We have Dan Karchner from HP with us, and he's going to let you in on what the HP Folio has to offer. Dan is the SMB Product Manager at HP. He leads the business strategy for the SMB notebook and desktop portfolios. He is responsible for SMB programs and promotions and channel partner communications. Dan has been with HP for over 6 years, working in many different roles throughout the PC business unit. Dan holds a BA in marketing from Utah State University and received his MBA from the University of Utah. Dan and his family live in South Jordan, Utah. Now, before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items. If you are listening through your computer, please make sure the volume is turned up on the WebEx application in addition to your computer speakers. Also, if you experience any audio issues, please feel free to use the phone number provided in the chat box. This is a toll-free number, so neither you nor your employer should be charged. We will host a brief question and answer session following Dan's presentation today, so if you have any questions either during or after, please use the Q&A panel that can be found on the right side of your screen. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dan. So, Dan, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you so much for that introduction. Great to be here with you today. And this should be a rather short webinar. I think we'll probably be in about the 30-minute range of questions, depending on how many questions you guys drill me with. But I think a very worthwhile topic as we look at the Ultrabook, what HP is doing in the commercial Ultrabook, and as you make buying decisions and are understanding where the market is going with trends, I think it's definitely a valuable discussion, and I appreciate your attendance here today. And obviously, I appreciate PC Mall and their assistance in hosting this webinar. So with that, you'll notice here with this first image, maybe wondering what exactly is this. I like to tell stories, so I'd start off here with a recent email that I received. This is a little bit better picture, so I think you now have a better idea what this is. I sent this email about 2 months ago from a soldier in Afghanistan, and he wanted to thank HP for saving his life. And this is a unique one because obviously we try to save people money, we try to help people be more productive. Rarely am I in the business of saving lives, and so this was a unique one I thought noteworthy. You'll notice here the soldier had his notebook in his backpack, and he was shot. He was actually shot 7 times, of which only 1 hit him in the shoulder. He was able to live and escape without too much trouble. But you can see 1 hit the optical drive, 1 bullet hit his battery, and you had 4 that hit the screen, right where it is, obviously on his back, in his backpack. And the metal design of that notebook, which is something that we're proud of, obviously not necessarily designed to save lives, more used to be rugged, but it was rugged enough that it acted as a bulletproof protector to this gentleman. And he not only lived to tell the story, but he also got a new notebook because he had a care pack or a service that also covered him against damage, much like being shot at or dropped or spilled on, whatever that damage might be. So I thought that was a pretty cool story. And as we start off this particular webinar, one that goes right into the crux of our commercial notebooks, which is obviously not only to make cool machines, but to make stuff that's rugged, that can be used in a business environment, and is built to last. So next, I wanted to just real quickly run through what I'd like to cover today. One is the market trends. 2 is the Folio 13, which is our first launch at an Ultrabook at HP. And talk a little bit about what an Ultrabook is and how we fit within that Intel model. And then I want to talk through the HP notebook portfolio, how the Folio fits in within our overall portfolio of products in the mobility space. And then finally, we'll have some questions, and hopefully I'll have some answers. So as we look at the market, it's truly shifting. Being in this job in a company like HP, it's something that definitely keeps me on my toes. It's changing every day. It's one of those deals where if I go on vacation for a week, I come back, I can't really talk to customers until I check out what's happened in the past week, because there's a good chance what used to be true is no longer the case. Mobility is rapidly changing. As we look at the multiple device adoption, it's really grown our industry. Everything from smartphones to pads to notebooks to desktops, all these different units are adding to this idea in business that everyone has to have multiple devices. Now, if we're in a room together, I'd ask everyone to raise their hand and see how many in the room had more than 3 devices on their person that could be connected to the internet. Now, I would imagine there's a good share of you out there. I've had several presentations where I've had 4 and sometimes as many as 5 devices on a single person, which is getting a little crazy, right? I know with my mom, she still doesn't even have a smartphone, so she's one of those few people who still has peace in her life where she's not constantly connected to the internet through all these different devices. But this is the way of business, and it's rapidly evolving our market. Hence, the reason we see so many devices constantly hitting the market is consumers and customers are buying them because they want to be connected, they want to be productive, they want to be super mobile. There's so many choices to choose from. One thing I want to look at here is some statistics. We talk a lot about smartphones, and although HP is not currently in the phone market, it's not something that we have on our roadmap. It's something that's changing the dynamics of how we do business with the mobility of the devices that we use. So I wanted to just paint a little picture here. It's interesting as you look at from 2005 forward into 2013, there was a paradigm shift that happened right around 2009. And this is when we started seeing notebooks outpace the sales of desktop PCs. So there's about 169 million mobile devices that were sold that year, and that's when we start seeing that growth in notebooks really start to take off. Interestingly enough, desktops have not declined. I know sometimes we call them a mature market, but they're really pretty flat. If anything, at HP, they've grown a little bit. But as we look at the worldwide shipments, the PC shipments with desktops and notebooks continues to grow. Obviously, the majority of that growth continues to be with notebooks. And the reason why I call that out is as we move into the next, what I'd call paradigm shift, is when we see in 2011, when we start seeing smartphones outpacing PC shipments. This is really a big change in how devices are being sold and how people are accessing the internet. So we have the smartphones that are really shooting off into 2013. And then you see the white bar where we see tablets, which would a lot of different devices on the market. In 2010, when Apple launched the iPad, they sold about 15 million iPads in the year 2010, about 55 million going into 2011. And obviously with all these other competitors in the market around the tablet market, we continue to see growth, and we will continue to see that market pretty much double year over year going into the future, at least as far as we can see with the different results we have from third-party estimates like IDC. But I wanted to note that with the growth of tablets, with the growth of smartphones, we continue to see those core notebooks and PCs grow alongside with them. We don't see business users replacing their PC with a pad or with a phone. It's much like I alluded to earlier. It's another device that I've got in my backpack, but my notebook is not going away. Now, whether you be someone who really wants that thin and light notebook or possibly someone who's looking for something with a lot of power, maybe a mobile workstation that's got the graphics card integrated, there's a lot of memory, and possibly looking for a larger screen, whatever it might be. Everyone has their different needs, and I want to talk through how HP tries to meet those different business needs. But regardless of what they are, this trend will grow. Notebooks will continue to grow alongside with the different portable devices that we see on the market today. So back to this idea that the market is shifting. We know that everybody is connected. The ideas of checking your email and then leaving the office and checking them again the next morning are kind of over. Unfortunately, we're always connected, and business doesn't stop. We continue to see social networking that will continue to influence the market. Hence, we see smaller and smaller devices that are, most people who are using their smartphones are using Facebook or social media right there on their phones. And it's an interesting statistic as we look at the worldwide population. 1 in 9 people on the earth have a Facebook page. That is staggering. It was about a 1 in 14 a year ago. I imagine it will probably be 1 in 6 next year. But as we look at that statistic now, these are statistics that are placed on Facebook's website. That is really staggering. We see businesses doing work through social media where they're posting and using these different networks to do business as a huge change in the market, and one that mobile devices is helping to be more effective in driving that social network. We'll continue to see digital content double every 12 to 18 months. If you were to print all the digital media that was available today and you printed it out into books, it would stack from here to Pluto 10 times. And this is a massive amount of data that's at our fingertips. But then finally, the world is changing. I think it's really interesting as we look at how China is emerging and looking at the numbers that I'm constantly looking at China actually is set in 2012 to sell more PCs than the U.S. That would be the first time that has ever happened. So that's something that's really a huge dynamic change. As we see the growth in China, the adoption of devices like PCs there, we will see some changes. By 2030, it's estimated that 40% of consumer spending will be in China. Today, only 10% of consumer spending is in China. So this is definitely something that we're watching worldwide, not just in the consumer market, but how it affects how we do business. So with that, how is HP trying to leverage the market trends to be at the forefront of the market? We really kind of our core goals here in the mobile computing department here at HP is we want to make sure that we have devices that are secure and manageable and are rugged with global capabilities, everything from an SMB user all the way to an enterprise could use. We also want to make sure that we're not ignoring those consumer benefits that we have business users bringing to the office. Business users are bringing these devices that for so long have never been supported by IT, where all of a sudden you have a CEO show up who says, I want this device and I want it to work in my environment, and it's really being pushed into that market. And we want to make sure we have products that fit both worlds, where we've got the coolness of the consumerization of IT combined with the commercial ruggedness and the features that we love to see out of a commercial product. So with that, this I think leads really nicely into how HP is positioning those two needs into the Ultrabook. The Ultrabook is something that we're going to hear a lot of buzz around. I'm sure you already have. Ultrabook is not an HP word. This is an Intel word. In fact, as we go through this, I think you have a better idea exactly of what an Ultrabook is if this is a new term to you. First of all, Ultrabook is something that it has to hit certain requirements. It's being driven by Intel, where that market is really something where they're saying, hey, if you want to call that HP notebook an Ultrabook, it's got to hit this requirement. And it would be the same for our competitors. One is it has to be a certain thickness. If it's a 13-inch display, it has to be less than 18 millimeters. That's about 0.7 of an inch. So you're looking at about the height of a dime in order to be considered an Ultrabook. If it's a 14-inch display, it would have to be less than 21 millimeters, which is about the height of a nickel. So we're really shaving off these notebooks and getting very small. If you're familiar with the wattage behind an ultra-low-volt processor, on most notebooks today before the Ultrabook, you're looking at 30 to 35 watt processors, where we're really taking that down to about a 15 watt processor with the Ultrabook model. So yes, it's a little less powerful. I think most users will never notice the difference. But in order to get to that thin profile of an Ultrabook, there definitely had to be some changes that Intel has been working on with their architecture, which really is fantastic technology. And you really won't see a major loss in performance or anything from a lower volt processor. Next, it has to be super responsive. You'll notice that with most of these Ultrabooks, they're running a solid-state module, which gives you better performance, better battery life. Definitely a trend as we move into the future as the costs come down in solid-state drives, solid-state modules, and as we move to thin and light platforms, there'll be much more high adoption. Now, obviously, the cost is a little bit higher when we start bringing in these thin and light components that include solid-state drives. And I think we'll continue to see those prices get better and better as we see the competitiveness of the market and the component prices come down. And even at the entry of the Ultrabook, the costs are very affordable, considering the competition and the other things that are on the market for that kind of a profile. And then finally, I didn't include here, two things. One is battery life, and the last one I didn't include here is weight. Really, an Ultrabook is going to be in that 3 to 3.5 pounds for the 13, 14-inch form factor. It also is going to have at least 5 hours of battery life. The Folio, which I'm going to talk about longer here in a moment, has up to 9.5 battery life, which is the longest battery life of any Ultrabook on the market today. So that's substantial. And maybe you've seen the HP commercials. You've been watching some of the bowl games. We've had a lot of presence out there in the media with all these different business executives sitting around the pole at the airport, right? How we're huddling and hovering over the outlet because we need to charge our notebook before we get on our 3-hour flight. But really, those days are going to be over. If you remember to charge your notebook before you leave, there's no reason to even bring your power supply. You can just put it in your check bag because a lot of these notebooks, unless you're going international, you're going to have the battery life you need to get to the day. An interesting statistic as we look at third party, I don't want to just take my word for it, is how much of the market will be impacted by Ultrabook. Now, this is taking in the whole market, worldwide, consumer, commercial. Intel has very aggressive hopes for Ultrabook. as much as I love the platform, I do think it will succeed. I think this first year will be much slower than 40%, considering the price points and that not everybody's ready to shift over to this model. I would expect that we'll probably see more of a 6% to maybe even 15% on the high end, which is what IDC, a third-party study, is showing they would expect to see, and that includes consumer as well. And I think consumer adoption on this model would be even faster than commercial. But you see other competitors as well as other third-party analysts that are kind of piping in their estimates for the Ultrabook. And I guess we'll see at the end of the year how much we actually see move through on the Ultrabook and how much it captures of the market share. So here's a picture of the Folio 13. Unfortunately, I can't stand in front of you and do a Vanna White presentation and show this off, but you can see just by comparing this to this person's hand, a very, very sexy, thin, light notebook model. A couple things I wanted to make note of here as I show a few of these pictures is this really is built for business. It combines the super thin, lightweight, good looks of those consumer products that I talked about earlier, but with the business features that a lot of professionals are expecting. So it has that best-in-class battery life up to 9 hours, which would allow you to stay powered all day long. So going to another picture, I'm going to talk a few more talking points around this one. This shows the actual notebook with the dime next to it. You can see with the display up, the dime towers over the base unit of that chassis. It does have a metal design. So we've got the metal chassis, which is definitely an advantage over a lot of our competitors, which gives that true rugged feel, much like you'd get from one of our other commercial notebook lines in our Pro and Elite series today. Had that metal magnesium alloy finish. Also, we're looking at about 18 millimeter height, so that's impressive at this price point. And I might as well throw the price out now. This notebook is priced at $1,049. However, we have a rebate on the product at launch that runs all the way through April. That is at $999. So for sub $1,000, compare this to some of the other competitors out there. Some that even have a white cable, and this is a very impressive product for that price point. It does have the best-in-life battery of any Ultrabook on the market. It is super thin, super light. This is 3.3 pounds. So one area, if you look at the different analysts, one area where we get maybe beat up a little bit in comparison is it is slightly heavier than some of the other Ultrabooks, and there's some reasoning for that based off the components, the backlit keyboard, the different modules that we're using in the notebook. But still, at 3.3 pounds, the notebook I'm presenting on right now weighs, geez, it's close to 5 pounds. It's only less than a year old. So I mean, 3.3 pounds, light, a very light notebook, very sexy with that backlit keyboard. So that's also, it has the 13.3-inch diagonal display. It is a bright view display that has the full backlit keyboard, second generation Intel iCore i5 mobile processor. So this is the Sandy Bridge platform. These are fantastic processors. Intel has made some great headway in technology. As we launched this particular SKU into the commercial market, it does have an i5. There's also a Folio 13, not to be confused with this one, that is available through our consumer markets. It doesn't have the same commercial build as this does. And so I'm going to talk through a few of those differences. One is they have an i3, where we're only pushing the i5 version, which is a little bit better performance from Intel. This does have the 128 gigabyte solid-state drive. One difference from the commercial unit is this has a commercial warranty with the option to get a 3-year warranty upgrade, which we would call a care pack. So on the consumer version, that would not be an option. And commercial warranty is given a preferential, better treatment than a consumer warranty is, and there's some differential factors on how commercial warranty is treated as well. Another key difference is this has TPM 1.2. TPM stands for Trusted Platform Module, and it allows for encryption and a lot of security features that the consumer version was not as concerned about in the market it was being pushed into. So this does have the TPM. It also has the professional operating system. So where the consumer version is going to have Windows 7 Home Premium, the Folio 13 on the commercial side has the Windows 7 Pro 64-bit operating system. So he's talking through a couple other specs on this unit. It does have an HD webcam, which has what we call True Vision and wireless functionality supporting Wi-Fi. It also has a USB port 2.0 as well as 3.0. It has an HDMI port and also the RJ45 port, which is the ability to connect via LAN to your Cat5 cable So not only does it have wireless capability, but you can also connect directly without any dongle. There are other units out there that don't have that as part of the build. It's something you actually have to dongle to connect and cable into your Ultrabook. With HDMI, this is something I obviously have several notebooks that I use, and it's great to be able to HDMI right into my TV. I know I've got a couple kids at home, and it's something we have a lot of fun, just being able to take my notebook and go HDMI straight into my HD TV and be able to show pictures or videos or home videos or watch a movie right there off my laptop. And it's something that I think a lot of consumers are doing frequently, and we're seeing HDMI being incorporated into more and more commercial notebooks. So following some of these specs here, I wanted to talk through a little bit more about the battery life. So as you look at all the competition, as I mentioned, you're really going to probably get more in that 4 to 6 hours from most of our competitors. Kind of hanging our hat on this. This is a big deal. If you want a mobile notebook, you want to make sure you don't have to plug it in all the time. And I had a netbook back when netbooks first launched. Everyone was really excited about that really small, cute form factor. Part of the problem is the battery life on most of them is just terrible, where it's great when it's working, but you're on a flight and you're only going a couple hours and it doesn't even last that long, and you don't have any option to be able to put any sort of a secondary battery on it. That is definitely a downfall, where a unit like this really gives superb battery life. In fact, one thing where HP was praised from PC Magazine, in fact, there's an editor there named Eric Grefstad, and he came out and said, this is his quote, that I would mention this. He said, of PC Magazine, they praised the Folio 13 for its competitive, if not head-of-class performance benchmark scores, as well as its silky smooth touchpad and comfy keyboard that provides good tactile response without the did-not keystroke register uncertainty of some of its rivals. He also appreciates that the system is flex, wiggle, and wobble-free. Some of our competitors, you can really flex the screen, not with this metal chassis. It doesn't flex and wobble around. You're really grasping a solid unit. And he closed this out saying, whether you're grasping the screen by the corners or typing with it in your laptop, in your lap, is something you can say is not something you can say for many Ultrabooks. So I thought that was a great endorsement coming from PC Magazine, saying it's one of the best Ultrabooks, if not the best, on the market. All right, a couple of advantages here as we look at the 128 gigabyte solid-state drive. It does have a faster data access, including the boot time. You should be able to boot this unit within 8 or 9 seconds. A great advantage to solid-state. I'm trying to run most of my machines I'm using now on solid-state because it's really hard to go back to a spindle drive once you've had the performance of a solid-state. I mean, you can be putting 16 gig of memory in your notebook or whatever you want, but that solid-state drive really, really helps performance really across the board, which is a fantastic benefit that you're going to get from this. Not all the Ultrabooks out there have a solid-state module. Sometimes they're being incorporated with flash memory, where this has the full 28 gigabyte storage capacity. Now, what's interesting is you look at that, a lot of people get a little concerned. I think one of the biggest deterrents from moving over to a solid-state drive is the capacity, where maybe you're used to having a 500 gigabyte drive, or maybe even got a terabyte drive on your desktop, and 128 just seems so small. I doubt many of you, unless you're really into surveillance video or a lot of multimedia stuff, are using that much space on your hard drive. I dare you to check it out. I know I use quite a bit of heavy stuff, and I'm not even close to having that sort of capacity. So even though it sounds small compared to some of the spindle drive capacities, I would venture to say it's probably not a concern for most users on the capacity. The prices continue to come down on solid-state drives, which gives even more room for adoption that we'll continue to see in the future. With the lack of moving parts, it really adds to that overall performance, and it helps to get to something like 9 hours of battery life. All right, so we talked to the backlit keyboard. That obviously is something that can be turned on or off depending on how you want to save your battery life. I know when I'm sitting in bed trying to be quiet in the dark, it's fantastic to be able to put that backlit keyboard on and be able to see my keys. As much as I'm a pretty good typer, it's still amazing that typing in the dark is not an easy thing to do. And having that backlit keyboard is something that I think you'll see more and more from HP, and we're incorporating that right here in our initial Ultrabook. So a couple of things that are unique here as well. There's a couple of technologies. One is called the Intel Rapid Start technology. So for the Folio notebook, it automatically will recognize and store your most frequently used files and applications on the solid-state drive so that you can access them faster. So it's just a quicker access time for your drive to talk to the CPU where you can get those files quicker, and that's a new technology on the Ultrabook. Also the HP Cool Sense, which is really where your notebook intellectually can tell where your notebook is at and how it should run, so it can tell how hot it can or can't be. Obviously, if it's sitting on your lap, you don't want it to be burning your legs. And I'm sure many of us have had laptops in the early days where it's almost like a heater to have your notebook sitting in a classroom. Well, this isn't going to be the case with the Folio. By really rethinking the materials, the venting, the placement of the components, HP's pioneered a new design to really help you feel, that notebook will feel cooler, especially when you need it to feel cooler. Kind of like Gatorade tastes the best when you need it to. The Folio will be cooler when you need it to, as it can adjust depending on the environment that it's in. So that's a fantastic feature as well to keep it nice and cool when you're using it on your lap. So finally, I wanted to talk through just a couple more differences here, and then I'll talk through the overall portfolio, and we can wrap things up for the day. One thing that has been asked quite a bit about the Folio is what's the memory capacity. It does come with a 1 DIMM 4 gig memory slot, so it is not upgradable. So just want to get that one out there. There's been several questions about that on its capacity. It does not support a common docking. It does support USB docking. But if you're looking for, like many of our commercial notebooks where you can plop it right into your docking station, there is no docking connector on this unit. With it being more of a consumer leveraged design, that is not something that you're going to see from any Ultrabook right now. HP, without giving it any more detail than I'm allowed to at this point, does have plans within this year to launch other notebooks that will have capabilities that will allow things like common docking, potentially even a secondary battery support. If you've ever used a secondary battery, that's the ability to hot swap your secondary battery so that you can gain that extra 3 to 4 hours of battery life, which is a great commercial solution. Unfortunately, the Ultrabooks at this point do not have, and the HP Folio included, do not have the capability to tack on a secondary extended life battery. So that's just something to mention as well. If that's something that's truly crucial, it may be better for you to look more at a notebook that allows for some of those commercial accessories to be included. Obviously, there's no optical drive here. You're not going to see optical drives. They're going to be much like a lot of our other ports and other drives that we've seen in the past. I mean, much like a zip drive or a floppy disk, the optical drive is going to become less prevalent in notebooks. As we get thinner and lighter, there's just no room for it, and for the most part, there's no use for it. I know that many of us are still hanging on to our DVDs and our discs and want to be able to use those on the road, but you still can with this unit. You just have to have an external optical drive that can run via USB. And I've got one of these I use quite a bit. Obviously, it's one extra thing to have to bring along, but for the most part, I think optical drives are primarily being used to download software, which you're going to be doing at your office anyway. So that's one of the things to keep in mind, that there is no optical drive on an Ultrabook. All right, so as I'm reviewing my notes here, some of the last things I want to touch upon, one is the touchpad. So the touchpad on this unit is enhanced. It's that quote I read earlier, it's one of the areas we're getting some praise is the great feel of the touchpad. It includes sensors that are built in for more accurate gesture support on the touchpad surface. It also has 1, 2, and 3 finger gesturing. So if you're used to using a phone where you can drag and drop and use your expand and decrease by using your 2-finger scroll or 3-finger scroll, that's something that these new touchpads also support. So that's a great feature. I know I was actually using my notebook this morning, planning for some different things going on, and I was trying to expand so I could see a little bit bigger on my notebook, and doing a 2-finger pinch, I was able to expand my notebook right off my touchpad, which is such a great feature without having to use my mouse or having to use any other function to expand my file.